Okay, welcome, Dr. Sascha. Good afternoon. Thank you for joining me today. I'm Liza Shahnaz. I'm one of the lecturer here in Universitas Borneo Tarakan, Fakultas Hukum. I'm thrilled today to have you to speak with you as a project coordinator for LEAP OKP program and as a constitutional law professor.
Thank you very much. I'm very excited to be here. Thank you very much for having me. And I'm always happy to be back at this university.
Is this your first time?
It's my second visit, actually.
How do you find Tarakan?
I like it. I like it very much. It has a nice climate and it has the best seafood.
Okay. And we hope to see you more in the future.
I hope so too. If I can, I will definitely be back.
Yes. Okay. Today we will be talking with Dr. Sascha, with Mr. Sascha, about his role and responsibilities in the LEAP OKP program as a project coordinator. So maybe you can share some of your role and responsibilities in this program, LEAP OKP program.
Sure. So under the Orange Knowledge Program, which is a large funding scheme that has now ended, it was funding provided by the Dutch Ministry of Foreign Affairs and managed by NUFIC, the internationalization organization for Dutch education. We won a funding grant, one of two funding grants that were awarded back in 2019 for a project called LEAP, that stands for Legal Education, Ethics and Professionalism for the Rule of Law. It was a project primarily designed to improve or help modernize the system of legal education in Indonesia, and specifically also for the inclusion of universities outside the central regions of Indonesia. So in the LEAP project, we have as a main partner or a facilitating partner Universitas Airlangga in Surabaya, but we also have a network of universities outside Java, of which this university here, Borneo Tarakan, is one. The others being Mula Warman in Samarinda and Halu Oleo in Kendari, where we'll go tomorrow, and Nusa Cendana in Kupang, and Universitas Trunojoyo, difficult to pronounce, in Madura.
Yeah.
So these are our, as we call them, dissemination partners. And the program stood on different legs. A very important of these legs was to help introduce the problem-based learning system. Why? Because before we applied for the project, we looked at the long-term development plans of the Indonesian government, and also we made an assessment of the current state of legal education in Indonesia at the time. And we discovered that there are a number of things that we thought that this collaboration could help with. One was that very often teaching is done in a rather classical manner, very frontal. So you have lecturers on a podium lecturing to students. Students' task is to memorize and later on exams to reproduce knowledge. Now, this is, of course, a system that has been around for ages, also not only in Indonesia, but everywhere in the world. But it doesn't connect very well, we found, with the current developments on labor markets. So where people, for example, change professions and change roles more often than before, and where one of the requirements for successful work is not so much reproduction of knowledge, but critical thinking, soft skills, actively engaging with your role, and also the versatility to ease into a new role. Also, the law has changed, of course. So next to teaching methodology, we also updated the content of many courses. We produced new modules, new courses, updated existing ones. We wrote guidelines for specific aspects of teaching, such as online teaching during the pandemic or the incorporation of moot courts into legal teaching. We did more things. We published some websites, for example. One that I'm particularly proud of is cons.id, cons.id, which is a website about constitutional affairs, democracy, and the rule of law, specifically in Indonesia, which is open to contributions from researchers, but also other stakeholders from Indonesia, in Bahasa mainly, some contributions from people from outside Indonesia in English. And the idea is that by this we want to lower the threshold, make it accessible to people outside Java, makes it accessible for people outside the academic world. We also created a network, the Jaringan Pendidikan Hukum Indonesia, JAPI. There's a website too, japi.id, japhi.id, to which we first of all invited our existing partners, so the 5 universities I mentioned, plus Erlangga University, but which is in principle open to all universities which engage in legal teaching in Indonesia and which have an interest in modernizing and updating their teaching approaches. So many of the materials we produced in the LEAP project, written guides on how to do things, also concrete teaching materials, videos, presentations, these things are all accessible through the JAPI website, and also the network organizes things like what I'm here for today, PBL trainings and courses for lecturers and stakeholders in education. The LEAP project has ended. It actually was supposed to run from 2019 to 2022. Because of the pandemic, we had an extension by 1 year, so it ended. It was supposed to run until the end of 2021, but due to the pandemic, it ended at the end of 2022. So we are now in the post-project phase and already working on new collaborations.
Okay. Thank you for the answer and good luck for the future plan from the OKP program.
Thank you very much. We hope that your university will continue to be part of the next phases of this collaboration.
Yeah, we gladly to join this because we see a lot of benefits in learning a lot of new things to implement in our universities from the LEAP program. And for the maybe you can also share some examples from, since you told me that there are some universities outside of Java that also contribute to these projects, and what are their contributions so far from our university and others, and what can we improve from that?
So initially, the idea behind the LEAP project, because of course funding is limited, travel is difficult, and so on, was that we would invite a number of lecturers, especially from UNER, to train in things like PBL in Maastricht, and then they would pass on the training also in Bahasa Indonesia at our partners outside Java. Now, due to the pandemic, we had to move much of our project activities for a full 2 years, 2020 and 2021, online. It turned out, ultimately, that this was actually a quite beneficial exercise, because this way, first of all, we were able to train lecturers, including from your university and from the other dissemination partners, more directly. So we did trainings online, but we did them to a large extent in Bahasa. And we were able, instead of training maybe 15, we were training, I think, ultimately more than 100 staff, including from universities from the more remote regions of Indonesia, from the perspective of Java. Also, we ended up creating the websites that I already talked about, to which we have contributions, including contributions from several lecturers from the dissemination partners. So we see that the system is working. We have very good feedback about the PBL training, and we see that while it goes more slowly in some places, some universities, than in others, that all of the partners are still engaged with this and still want to continue implementing this. Of course, there are still difficulties. That's rather normal, but this is why we also pledged to continue after the end of the official project. For example, this university is also part of a long-term MOU that we created together with the entire network and Maastricht University to keep working together on new projects. Also, I believe that lecturers from this university have contributed chapters or a chapter to a book that we published, Legal Education in the 21st Century. I think the subtitle is International and Indonesian Perspectives. So there's also a joint publication effort here, and we continue to work together on these things.
Okay. And listening to your story, you mentioned several times how the technology play important roles in this PBL. Looking at that, we are in remote area, and that I can say that we are still under-resourced, and sometimes even we experience blackout almost every day, and then on the internet, limited internet connection, and how can we improve this situation, because we have only limited resource.
Now, luckily, the pandemic is over, so the teaching need not be fully online anymore. Of course, one of the things that an inter-university collaboration project cannot improve by itself is connectivity. What we see is that while on the one hand, as I have been telling, this movement towards online during the pandemic, but of course it's going to stay, has been an equalizing force, right? So due to every university, regardless of where in the world they are, having to move teaching online, this was a chance for universities also in more remote regions to participate more actively, because everybody was online and so could you be. At the same time, I think we see that this drive for more online education and more online activities, more in general, also in commercial life and privately and wherever, creates new fault lines, new inequalities. And now the new inequalities, for example, will be about connectivity. So obviously it is easier to do things online if you are in a place which has no electricity cutouts, no connectivity issues. But even in Surabaya, when it was the rainy season, they had problems with connectivity. So yeah, infrastructural improvement is necessary. That is not something that law faculties can do by themselves. That requires investment. I do believe, however, that the Indonesian government is very strongly committed to also bridging these gaps within the country between especially Java and regions further outside this innermost part of the country. The day after tomorrow, for example, I will be in an online meeting. Ironically, I'll be here, so I'll participate online with the Indonesian ambassador to the Netherlands, with Maastricht University, different faculties, where we will discuss opportunities for collaboration. And in a previous meeting, His Excellency Mr. Meyerfas has expressed that the specific strategy of the Indonesian government will be in the future to foster collaborations specifically with universities outside Java. And here LEAP, I think, can be a great example, because we are not the first ones that do it. Also the other OKP project running alongside us, the SLAY project under the guidance of Leiden University, has also had partners outside Java. But if you look generally at the operations of Dutch universities in Indonesia, it's still very much focused on Java. So I think our experience can set a good example. And also I'm very happy that we have these MOUs, that we have created a network, that we stay in touch, that we keep in contact, we keep inviting lecturers from your university and others outside Java to come to Maastricht, for example. Now in October, I hope we can have another such experience. I keep coming here, and so do other colleagues, hopefully. So we continue working on it.
Yeah, so hopefully we can keep on helping each other.
Yes, exactly.
Yeah.
I think that is an important keyword, because if we look at also from the Dutch side, the strategy that has been published about future funding and what the officials are saying, we are going to move away from a system that is essentially one-way traffic, knowledge transfer, skills transfer from the Netherlands or other European countries and America to Indonesia, onto a more equal footing. So, for example, the next round of funding, if the information is correct that I got from the Dutch embassy in Jakarta, for example, will definitely have a research component and a more mutual exchange, so that also, there will, for example, be Indonesian researchers visiting the Netherlands for research purposes, or joint publications, or Dutch PhD students coming here to do research. So a more equal level of exchange. I think that's a good development, because Indonesian researchers frequently are excellent. They suffer often from structural problems, such as lack of access to information, and also struggle with international publications because of the language. But the quality of research itself is not a very big issue. So I think collaboration in this domain will be the next step. That's very important, yes.
Yeah. And from what I have seen, I have read that a lot of universities in Netherlands are interested with the development of legal as professions, and as the research. They have this institution that focus on the development of Islamic law, and then they publish a lot of these things that I believe that Indonesia needs to have this collaboration with those in outside world, so that everyone can experience Indonesian, or can learn about the variety of legal life in Indonesia.
Yes.
Yeah.
Indonesia is of course a very interesting case for many legal domains. I'm a constitutional lawyer, and of course Indonesia is, if you
Very
zoom out,
unique.
if you zoom out a little bit, it is very unique in several senses. It is also one of the largest democracies in the world. It is also a very interesting post-colonial project, if you want, the constitutional development of Indonesia. And it is a constitutional laboratory, because the new Indonesian state after 2000 and after the end of the Suharto regime is, of course, still very young, and there are many developments still ongoing. The Constitutional Court has taken up operation, I think, about 20 years ago only. So there are many things still happening in this place. At the same time, we see that there is critical exchange. So Indonesia has recently adopted a new criminal code, which is largely, and I think for a large part also correctly, seen with very critical eyes by scholars outside Indonesia, because Indonesia is, in some respects, at a crossroads when it comes to constitutional issue, but also when it comes, for example, to the fundamental rights records. The pandemic has not really helped with this. The new criminal code is, in some respects, most definitely a step backwards when it comes to human rights issues. So there is a necessity for mutual understanding, for mutual research, for critical assessment, for Indonesian researchers to go outside into the world and discuss, and for the world to come here and keep discussing.
Yes, thank you, Dr. Sascha. And about since you've mentioned about the constitutional law, how important is human rights for the development of constitution in a country generally?
It is very important. Having a constitution doesn't make a country, modern, doesn't make a country work, and doesn't make a country be successful. Usually what we see, or what we as constitutional scholars observe, is that what you need in order to have at least a stable, if not successful, long-term development is this triangle of consisting of the rule of law, which of course requires a strong set of constitutional norms, together with democracy and a good implementation of democratic principles, and the two of them combined with fundamental rights. Fundamental rights, especially when it comes to the protection of minorities, the protection of equality of the genders, also the protection of religious minorities. And Indonesia is a very interesting, also difficult case here, because it has so many different regions, and it has cultural diversity, it has linguistic diversity, it is full of minorities. And here, I think Indonesia is at a very critical time in its development. And it's not, this is not to say that Indonesia is, from a worldwide vision, a problematic country. We have developments in Europe that are very worrying. If you follow European constitutional development, we have a rule of law crisis. We have member states of the European Union, which are arguably engaged in what we call constitutional backsliding. So where democracy is being undermined, being in regression. So I think, again, this is not a one-way exercise. It is also not us Europeans looking critically at what you Indonesians are doing. This would be very arrogant to do. No, this is also not what my field comparative constitutional law is about, or should be about. I think everybody on all sides benefits from exchange and also from multiple perspectives. And I think we can understand each other and each other's systems and our own systems better if we look at how other systems deal with similar problems. They take the European Union. It is an amalgamation of countries. It's not a country itself. But if we treat it as a country for the moment, in many respects it is. We have a common lawmaker, we have a common court system, and we have we have almost something like a constitution with the treaties. We have many similarities with a place like Indonesia. We are ethnically diverse, we are religiously diverse, we are linguistically diverse. We have something like, if you allow the comparison, the divide between a set of common norms and a set of local norms that we have at national level. So this is not at all uninteresting also for us to see how systems like this are built elsewhere in the world.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and there's a lot of things that us Indonesians should also learn as from the global citizens. Since if we look at the people who are mostly online nowadays, they can sometimes forget about these identities, that we have to be open for all ideas. And following the questions about the legal educations that you have mentioned, maybe you can also share that some of the aspirations that why LEAP OKP finally choose only Indonesia. Is this also happening in? Are you also working in in different country?
So the funding program, the Orange Knowledge Program that is now ending, provided funding not only for projects in Indonesia but also in other countries. In many countries, for example, there were programs focusing on agriculture and improving the efficiency of agriculture, for example, in African countries. I know that the next funding round, or the next program, we don't know the name yet. It won't be OKP 2.0, it will be something similar. But we know that a very large fund is coming. several hundred million is a figure that I heard. We also know that very likely the strongest focus of this funding program will be on developing countries. Now, Indonesia is no longer a developing country, or it is what we call a threshold country.
We claim to be, but I don't.
Yes, but if you look at so there are official definitions of this, and if you look at median income level, I think Indonesia is what is called a low middle income country, something like this. So it is not on the list of developing countries on a par with countries in sub-Saharan Africa, for example. We know that the Dutch Foreign Ministry is placing an emphasis on these developing countries, but due to the important common history of the Netherlands and Indonesia, and the Netherlands and South Africa, these two countries will very likely be exempt from this focus. So meaning that part of the funding will be made available, we hope, and this is also what has been cautiously communicated or signposted, will be made available for collaboration with Indonesia. One thing we in Maastricht, and together with our partners in Erlanger, have been thinking about, and we are in communication about, is to set up, for example, a triangular collaboration between Maastricht University and or other partners in the Netherlands, together with our Indonesian network, which already exists, and our equally existing network that we have in South Africa. Because South Africa has, of course, it's different, the situation is entirely different again, but then not completely. It also has a historical path dependency and historical roots that link with the Netherlands. It has had a relatively recent, with the abolition of apartheid, constitutional overhaul, same as Indonesia had, but for different reasons, is struggling with relatively similar issues when it comes to regionalism and the divide between several urban centers of population and more remoter areas. So there are a lot of commonalities. And we already have networks in both countries. So one idea that we had is, why not combine these and build a triangular pattern? This is in its very early stages of development, but we will continue working on it, and I hope that something for everybody's benefit will result from this.
Yeah, good luck for that.
Thank you.
And maybe for the last question for today, Dr. Sascha, maybe you can also share about the effectiveness of these initiatives that you implement throughout this program.
So I believe, without false immodesty, that the project was more effective than we initially thought. In part, this is down to luck, because in many respects, the pandemic was catastrophic, but when it comes to the development of this particular project, it actually turned out to be a stroke of luck. It was also hard work, because we had, for example, online meetings every week, whereas in normal times we would have had them a couple of times a year. So it became much more labor intensive for us. But ultimately, when you look at what has happened, we have still managed to sustain the network, also beyond the project duration. We have heard the good news, which I think is not completely unrelated to our project, that the Indonesian Ministry of Education has at least expressed an interest in PBL and made it a focus for universities throughout the country to implement elements of problem-based learning or project-based learning based on this information and based on our experiences, also my own experiences in teaching classes here, giving trainings here, being in exchange, that there is a continued interest. And that also students, I talk to students a lot, see the benefit in this. Maybe not the first time around, maybe not immediately, but with a little bit of practice, we see this. We also have, just to finish this off, we have double degree programs. And at the moment, there are 2 double degree programs, both with Javanese universities, it's true, one with UGM and one with UNER. But when you talk to the students who were in these programs and who have experienced PBL in Maastricht for 2 years, respectively, we were just told this morning by Pa Arif that students tell him that they would not want to have any other type of education. So it is a successful model, and my personal experience is, yes, it can be difficult, but it can be implemented in Indonesia, and I can only encourage you to continue on this path.
Thank you, Dr. Sascha. Hopefully we can implement full project-based learning method fully in all of our classes, since I also find it very beneficial for my own, since I am now a student myself. I'm still on study leave actually for my doctoral program.
Good luck.
Thank
Success.
you. It's very stressful, but yeah, I have to do it. And hopefully a lot of us have to have a lot of motivations to do this for the sake of our students.
Yeah. Of course, it's we hope that this will be implemented, but I think it's also important to note maybe as an encouraging nod to universities, especially with limited resources and with limited experience with this. PBL is not a binary thing. It's not something that you either fully do or don't do at all. You can, and I think this is the way that institutions in the situation as yours should perhaps pursue. You can introduce it incrementally. So have for example, reducing the group size from 50 to 14 or 15 in an instant is not possible. You don't have the staff to do that. You don't have the facilities to do that, the necessary rooms, and so on and so on. So what can you do? You can take elements which work in a larger group, or you can take some of the meetings of your group and break them up into smaller ones. So you can ease it in, because if you do it the brutalist way, immediately going from one system full on into another system full on, it is probably more difficult, and you will probably experience more lack of motivation and breakdowns than otherwise. So I think don't be discouraged by the structural obstacles that there are, but implement whatever you can implement and do it progressively. I think that is the way to go forward.
Yeah, so we have to do it step by step.
Yes.
Yeah. Okay. Thank you, Mr. Sascha, for these very insightful discussions, and I wish you good luck for all of your future endeavors, future projects, and I hope you can also visit more to our universities.
Thank you very much for having me. I'm always very happy to be back at your university.
Okay, good afternoon, everyone.